Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Tech 2 manufacturing, specifically BPCs and the manufacturing process itself. So I'm going to assume you have a general knowledge of manufacturing and BPC copies, how to get them, etc. If you do not know this, then by all means do continue to watch. Some of it will probably not make a huge amount of sense. I do have videos earlier that I have made that do cover these topics, so it might be worth checking them out. Either way, we're going to jump straight into it. So the process is relatively straightforward. You take your BPO, which is our heavy missile launcher here, you create a copy. From that copy you use data cores in order to make a Tech 2 BPC copy, and from that Tech 2 BPC copy you can then create the Tech 2 heavy missile launchers. So by clicking in the flasks, it will tell you what skills are required in order to copy the BPO, in order to make the BPC copies. Now the heavy missile launcher for here, for instance, doesn't take any required extra skills or input materials to create a copy. So when creating copies from the BPO, it's important to make sure that your job runs and your copy runs are as you want them. So for instance, for the heavy missile launcher here, I'm going to create one BPC that has 100 runs on it. So you generally want a decent number of runs. It will depend on the item itself on how many actual runs you want. So for job runs, again we can create, for instance, 5 BPCs with 100 runs each, and that'll take us 2 days to accomplish, and so on to a maximum of 30 days. Now obviously the larger the item, you may not want so many runs, but for the smaller items you want to be creating relatively decent size BPCs, and the reason for that will become apparent very shortly. Right, so here we are, we've got our BPC, one BPC with 300 runs on it. Now obviously on the tabs here we need to click in Invention, and this brings up the Invention window, which is again very similar to the manufacturing window, just with a few extra bits and bobs that you need to be aware of. So first of all, on the left hand side we have the input materials, same as we would do with any manufacturer. Now we have, obviously up here we have data cores which are required, and here we have data cryptors. Now these aren't necessarily required, and again we'll cover that part later. So at the moment we're just focusing on the data cores. And on the right hand side we have our success chance, which for this is 46.5%. If you hover over, it tells you which skills are adding to this and what it is that you actually need to be skilled in order to be able to do the invention. Down here it gives you obviously the time and input cost. Here it tells you the ME and the PE ratio that you're going to come out with. Now for this BPC, the maximum I could get success probability wise if I had max skills is 49.58%. So with the category and the item, the percentage does change. Now although I have this trained to level 5, 4 and 1, if this was all trained to level 5, there is still only a 43% probability run of this succeeding, and again that will change. If it was a cruiser, that would be slightly less, as it would be a battleship, as it would be a jump freighter, etc. So the success probability does change depending on the item. Generally the smaller the item, the higher the inherent probability of success is. So when you're looking to actually start your invention, what you will need is you will need the BPC and the data cores in the same station, and if you are using hangars, etc., in the same hangar. Now something to be aware of, obviously here it won't let me start because the material requirements are not met. Now that is because it is looking in the BPO hangar to the BPC hangar, etc. So you need to choose the hangar in which your materials are located. Mine are located here, and as you can see these have now filled in. You can change the output to wherever you want, but obviously the input materials have to be coming, and it has to be looking in the right hangar for them. Now it is possible to do it in the actual station itself, and again it's the same principle, that it all just needs to be in the same hangar. You right click, using industry, etc., and it will bring up the exact same screen. I'm just doing this with scientific networking due to the fact that I am not in the station, or I'm using next door system in order to be able to do the invention. So in order to check to see if you have the required skills, etc., right click on the BPC, show info, click in the invention tab, and it will list here the skills that you will need in order to be able to do the invention for that BPC specifically. So as you can see here, it's quite a list of skills. Some of them are a bit random, like mechanics, power grid, etc. So say the actual level of the specific skills, the higher they are, obviously the higher the percentage, as we've discussed. So by looking at the BPC, you can see here that we would need rocket science, and in order to get rocket science we need these. We'd also need nuclear physics, and for that we need these two, and Caldari encryption methods. We need the rest of the skills here, as well as randomly science level 3. Now the skills are race specific, so the heavy missile launcher is classed as a Caldari item, and therefore you will need Caldari encryption methods for it. Some items do share some of the skills, so for instance the 200mm autocannon also needs nuclear physics, but instead of the Caldari encryption methods, it would need the Minmatar encryption methods. So now we've got the point, we've got the data cores, we know our success rate, we know the MEP we're going to come out on. It's now time to start producing some inventions. Now, as you can see here, it tells us that we have 177 runs remaining, and although the BPC in our hangar has 300, that is because 177 runs brings us out at the maximum job duration of, which will round down or up depending on the size of the BPC that you are doing, so it will round it as close to 30 as it can get it. So getting back to the earlier point of creating a BPC with more runs on it, if I'd created this BPC with just the one run, I would only obviously be able to use it for one run until that BPC is consumed and used. Now that would take me 4 hours and 5 minutes. Well, if I wanted this to obviously run for, we'll say, 2 days, I'd need 12 or 11 depending if I wanted this side of 2 days or just over 2 days. So by having more job runs, it gives you an air of flexibility, so say up to the maximum of the 30 days. So I could do a 30-day invention amount in one go here, which would give me 177 chances of getting a heavy missile launcher Tech 2 BPC. So with upping the number of jobs to 177, you will need the corresponding data cores as well. So for this specifically, I need 354 of each of the data cores, so the nuclear data cores and the rocket science data cores. Now these will be consumed regardless of the outcome. So at the moment I have a 46.5% chance of getting a BPC Tech 2 heavy missile launcher. These cores will be used regardless of whether that is successful or unsuccessful, as well as the corresponding runs from the BPC. Each successful run for the BPC will create, for items specifically, it will create a 10 run BPC. Now if that is a ship, it will create a 1 run BPC. So for modules or items, not 100% of the time, but again it does state down here that you will get 10 runs. So I've got a chance of 177 of these at 10 runs apiece. So now for the maths part. Is it worth it? Well, as we know, we are going to need 2 cores for each of these in order to create one 10 run BPC. So if we right click on here, buy all the materials, it will tell us how much the data cores are, which is 485,000 ISK. And then we have the installation cost. Now obviously this will vary depending on the size of the item, but for this specifically it is relatively insignificant. So in order to work the cost out for this, we need to take the price of the data cores, which was 485,000 ISK. Now we've got a 46.5% chance of succeeding, so we need to add 103.5% for this, which gives us 986 ISK, and we need to divide that by 10 to work out how much it's costing per run from this BPC. So for the cost of the data cores divided by the price, the outcome, etc., gives us a cost at the invention cost per run, singular run, is 98,697 ISK. So now it's time to work out the cost. So we know the cost for the data cores was 485,000 ISK, plus the cost of installation. It may only be tiny, but obviously don't forget it. Some items it can be quite substantial. And then we need to take away, add the percentage, etc., because obviously there's a 46.5% chance we will succeed in this, which means there is what, 53.5% chance we are going to fail. So we will add the chance of failing. This gives us a grand old total per BPC. It is going to cost us 990,000 ISK per 10 runs. Now I'm going to divide that by 10 because I want the cost per run, which is 99,000 ISK per run from this BPC. And the reason I do it per run is because generally it's a lot easier to work out whether it's going to be successful in order to build them. So now we want to see whether it is worth building this item. So right click, buy all. So it's going to cost us 810,864 ISK to buy all the components in order to be able to produce this item. Now obviously we can see down the side here, RAM is inconsequential most of the time, so the percentage there doesn't matter. Heavy missile launchers are down, pretty much spot on. Robotics are up slightly, and Morphi is up slightly, so nothing out of the ordinary. So 810,000 ISK plus the 100,000 ISK per run, so that takes us up to 910,000 ISK that it would cost us to build one unit of heavy missile launcher. So now we need to check out the heavy missile launcher and see whether it is profitable. So as you can see here, they are selling for 1,000,000 ISK, and it's costing 910,000 ISK in order to produce it via Invention. As you can see here, I have a buy order at the moment open at 902,000 ISK, which is under the cost of Invention, and people have been selling me these items for that price. Obviously a couple have gone in higher, but that is. So at the moment the heavy missile launcher isn't profitable to be doing via Invention in high-sec. And that's because if we're selling it for 1,000,000 ISK, we have to take in market price, which is 5.3% to sell, and takes us down to 946,000 ISK once we've sold it on the market or put it on the market to sell. As we said, it was 910 ISK. We'll be making in 36.5 ISK per unit. And then you've got to factor into the cost of the installation for the heavy missile launcher. So just randomly again another 12,000 ISK. So it could be coming out with 22,000 ISK per unit, which in my eyes isn't worth it. And that in a nutshell is how you create a Tech 2 BPC and manufacture from it. Now there are third-party websites available which can help you with that. I don't generally use them. Again, I like to make life hard for myself. I do most of it manually. Again, I have a select number of items that I cycle through on a regular basis. If it's not profitable, again, sometimes I will build it if it's not profitable, because you have to take into account the fact that obviously if it's not profitable at the moment, hopefully less people are making it, and that would more than likely cause the price to rise. So if we look at the graph here, So you can see at the moment we are at quite a low. In fact, this is pretty much as low as heavy missiles go. So down to the million mark is, or has been for the last year, the baseline for heavy missile launchers. So now, for instance, might be a good time to start making Tech 2 heavy missile launchers, with the thought of the fact that they may end up going back up in the very near to mid future. So there's always something to be thinking about. Just because the item isn't necessarily profitable to build right now doesn't mean it's not worth building and hanging on to and having a stock if you've got the ISK in order to be able to do that. However, if you are looking at Tech 2 manufacturing, then you probably will want some kind of surplus of ISK. It's not necessarily cheap to get into. The data cores fluctuate, they're quite expensive, and they are gobbled up, as I said, with the invention itself. So if you are doing larger inventions, so for instance freighters take a huge amount of data cores, and the statistics or the chances of coming out with a BPC are relatively low. Even with the data cryptors, which we'll cover in another video, comes out at about 20 to 25% and is costing you 50 million in data cores. So obviously that is going to eat into any money, and if you do have a run of bad luck, then it can end up costing you quite a lot of ISK before you're likely to make any back. I think we'll leave it there for this video. If you've made it this far, then please do think about subscribing to the channel. I want to thank everybody that has subscribed so far. Again, massive thank you to everybody. It's very much appreciated. If you do enjoy this kind of content, then I do have quite a lot of videos now that cover ISK related activities on my channel. Please do check them out. Like this video if you liked it. Do leave a comment if Tech 2 is something that you are into and do on a regular basis. Whether you would encourage other people to do it. Obviously I know that can potentially cause competition, so that may dissuade you from it, but it's always nice to hear people's stories. Horror stories, good stories, always welcome. So I hope that's been helpful. I will cover data cryptors in upcoming videos and go into Tech 2 a little bit more, as that was more of a brief overview for Tech 2. I didn't want this video to run on for hours, because there is quite a lot to cover for Tech 2 stuff. You can go into reactions and everything prior to actually building the items all the way to the end and selling, like we've just done there. I generally pick an area and then focus on that area. I don't do the whole process from start to finish, just due to the fact that it's a right nightmare. So thank you for watching. Fly safe. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.